What do you do if you are separated right now from your wife, or if she wants to separate? Pay attention, because separation starts in the heart. It is emotional before it becomes a physical separation. And it's important to navigate this stage with sensitivity, intelligence, and caution. There are also positive opportunities when a couple is facing separation, but there are also dangers. In this video, I'm going to talk about and focus on the 5 phases of reversing separation. So you're going to be able to understand what these stages are about and where you are within the context of these stages. Now, at the end of this video, I'm also going to share with you how you can break down what led up to the separation, or to the fact that your wife even wants to separate or wants her space. Phase number 1 is understanding the problem. You need to understand the problem. Why does your wife want to separate? What led up to it? The difference between fundamentals and symptoms. Every marriage that has significant problems usually has dozens of little problems. And it's important to understand what are the big areas that are feeding your marriage cancer. And I'm going to share a link in the description under this video explaining what marriage cancer is. You need to understand the difference between fundamental issues and symptomatic issues. Whenever a woman is really upset with her husband, she will very often pick fights with him on smaller issues. And that then becomes a trap, because if you get stuck on those issues and get sucked into it, it actually creates more marriage cancer. And again, that video in the link will explain that, but stay until the end, because we're going to focus on the 5 stages of healing. So to recap, stage 1 is for you to have clarity on exactly what led up to this disconnect, to this emotional disconnect between you and your wife, what sabotaged your best efforts, what got in the way of healthy communication, emotional connection, and intimacy. Phase number 2 is to actually go ahead and make those changes. A lot of guys rush through this phase. They don't even recognize that this phase exists. They think that if I understand the problem, it automatically means that I understand the solution. And that could not be further from the truth. When you understand a problem, for example, if you have a root canal, you might understand that you have a root canal, but you might not be able to fix it on your own, even if you're watching a YouTube video. Phase 2 is for the husband to take the time to figure out the exact changes he needs to make to correct the fundamental areas of disconnect and frustration between him and his wife. A common mistake a lot of guys make as they go about changing their personality and transforming themselves as a man and as a husband is that they guess. They glean things from YouTube or Facebook, a bunch of different places, or books, or therapy. They put it all together, a hodgepodge, a stew of sorts, and then they just reach into it and say, let me just try to help around the house. Let me just give her appreciation, words of affirmation, buy her flowers, tell her I love her, tell her how much I'm committed, tell her how much I'm sorry. That's another trick that guys use, and it's a trap. I'm going to talk about it in a couple of minutes. That actually belongs in phase 4. Okay, we're right now in phase 2. You don't apologize in the first 3 phases. It's tempting, it's a trap, because if you apologize prematurely, it actually backfires against you.
Hey, it's David here, and I just want to jump in for a moment and tell you that if you are at a point in your marriage that you are frustrated with guessing, you can book a free marriage evaluation with me. You can pick a time so we can chat for a couple of minutes and explore what is going on in your marriage and what would be the next appropriate step for you.
Recap, phase 2 is for the husband to make very specific, strategic, and consistent changes in his personality, and the way you show up, and the way you interact, and the way you communicate, and the way you interpret what she's saying, and the way you analyze her, and the way you understand where she is coming from and what she wants and what is missing. And remember, separation is not just a physical separation. For a long time before a woman decides to even talk about separation with her husband, and certainly way before the separation actually takes place, whether it's in-home separation, out of the house separation, her taking her space, whatever label she wants to put on it, what is really happening and what has happened for a long time before that is she has thought about it for months or even years, that she is frustrated, she's unfulfilled, that she's not feeling connected to you or heard or seen. So it is very important to understand what is going on in her heart, the way she sees you, the way she feels about you, or the way she feels disconnected from you is far more important than the physical separation. It is important to understand that you need to go deep behind the scenes in her heart, in her mind, if you are going to have a chance at turning around your marriage. Phase number 3, incorporate those changes. This is different than phase number 2. A lot of guys and therapists and coaches do not understand the difference between these two. You actually have to incorporate those changes, align it with the true self inside of you, make it authentic as part of your personality, your character, your integrity, because if you don't do that, what is going to happen very often when there is marriage cancer, when you have a significant marriage problem, again, the marriage cancer video is going to be in a link under this description. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail over here. You'll watch that later. But when you do have marriage cancer, what is important to understand is almost always the woman is thinking to herself as her husband is making changes or attempting to make changes or is talking about his changes, what is going on in her mind is he manipulating me? Are his changes real? In order to overcome the accusation of manipulation, even if she's not saying it to you, even if it's just in her mind, the way she talks to herself, the way she sees you, the way she thinks about you, you need to make sure that whatever changes you make, it doesn't matter if you make 100 changes or 20 changes. I mean, on some level it does matter, but it's outside the context of today's video. But what is far more important and what we're focusing in today's training is that whatever changes you make, they must be aligned with your personality. They cannot just be something that you heard someone else do, because if you guessed your way through your marriage transformation, and before your marriage transformation, there is the personal transformation that you're going through and that you need to go through as a man and as a husband, she will sense women are very emotionally intelligent and intuitive, and she will sense if you're guessing, if you are just attempting to do something and trying to see if it sticks, or if it is actually a legitimate part of your personality. If she senses that you're guessing, what she's going to see, the way she processes it in her brain, in her psyche, in her heart, is he's manipulating me, or he's desperate, which is kind of the worst scenario, because if a man is desperate and makes all the changes you make, even if some of them might be legitimate, it actually casts doubt on that. Does that make sense to you? If you look back and reflect at the effort you've invested in your marriage, can you see what I'm talking about? If you have marriage cancer, you will know what I'm talking about. Phase number 4, she sees and trusts your changes. So after you've gone through phase number 1 of identifying what exactly went wrong, phase number 2, what changes you have to make, and phase number 3, to make sure that those changes are an actual legitimate part of your personality, now comes phase 4. Here is where your communication skills will kick in. Here is the time where you apologize, not before. A lot of guys write letters to their wives or apologize verbally or try to convince her of, I realize what I did and here's what I'm going to do. And they do it prematurely, because if you do it during any of the first 3 phases, or you're not even aware of those 3 phases, you will skip them, and apologizing before phase 4 doesn't work. Once you have those authentic changes within you and you're living them and it's really you, then you move on to the phase of communicating to her, talking about your transformation. Your wife has to understand, in order to fall back in love with you, in order to trust your changes, she has to trust herself too. She has to trust that she is not being taken for a ride. She has to feel like you are not manipulating her. So there are 3 things she has to understand. Number 1, she has to understand, are you really aware? Are you really in tune? Are you really internalizing and processing what happened in those years when you guys had marriage cancer, when you were frustrated, disconnected, or however you want to look at it, going through problems and painful situations and times in your relationship? How do you understand it? Do you understand it the way she understands it, or do you just have a 1% view of what she sees? If she sees the problem on a big scale and you're like, you kind of see a little bit of it. If you don't understand it, or you can't communicate to her what you understand about the problems that led up to this major blow up where she wants to separate or she already separated, she will not be able to trust your changes. Number two, she has to understand what exactly are those changes. When you say, hey babe, look, I understand I did yada yada yada, fill in the blank, but I'm going to start from now on, da 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 da. She has to understand, okay, specifics. What are those changes in terms of your attitude, in terms of your personality, your interaction, your communication? What can she expect specifically? And I believe this is the most important part of phase 4. Can I trust those changes? Why is now different? How is your story, you, the husband, the man, how is your presentation different now than it was in the past? One of the major challenges of a woman falling back in love with her husband is, yes, she doesn't trust him, but if you peel back the layer, what's deeper and what is really going on, it's hard for her to trust herself because she has to face herself every time she opens her heart back up to you and wants to love you or work on the relationship with you. If you disappoint her, her heart closes, but it closes more firmly, so to speak. It becomes more cemented in place, and she gets colder or thicker layer around her heart that makes it harder for her to open up. So it's not just about her trusting you, it's also about her trusting herself. And in phase 4, you need to address that with her. Again, let's connect the dots. A big part of marriage cancer is her believing that you're manipulating her. She doesn't want to be taken for a ride. And that's why it is so important that this phase not be done prematurely. Phase 5, how to deal with the reality that she has spoken about you to other people. This is very important. Phase 5 is critical because all the coaching programs that I have seen don't address this. And that is how to deal with the reality that she has spoken about you to other people. If your marriage cancer is advanced, she will be talking about you. She will be talking about you to her friends, to her coworkers, to her family, to people who are in her environment, close to her, care about her. And she may have made declarations about her opinion about you. Let's just say, oh, he's an angry guy. He's selfish. He's manipulating. I don't trust him. He's just self-absorbed, unaware. Whatever it is, fill in the blank. It could be hundreds of variables. And she may have said certain decisions. From now on, I'm not going to trust him. From now on, I'm just going to focus on living my own life. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to move along. I am going to separate. You have to be aware and sensitive to this reality. If she has made declarations about you, about herself, about the relationship, the marriage, her intentions, her decisions, about where she wants to go in life with or without you, then she has to face that after phase 4. Once you have successfully identified those changes in phase 1, made those changes in phase 2, authenticated them in phase 3, and then communicated and regained her trust in phase 4, she now has to face herself, and this can be a significant challenge for her. Okay, how do I address the fact that I said certain things to my friends and family, and now I have to make an about face? Now I have to come back and say, hey, by the way, Jason is, whatever I said about Jason, please forget. He's a great guy. We made up last night. I trust him now. If a week or two ago she told them, I'm never going to trust him again, or I don't even trust myself in terms of knowing if I can trust him or not. And when I say trust, I don't want you to think we're talking necessarily about affairs. That's a piece of it. It's relevant for some situations. Trust is not about affairs. Trust is about, do I trust his love, his integrity, his authenticity, his care, his intentions? So it's a broad term, but now she has to face that. And very often she will actually get stuck on what she said, because once she says it to people, certainly if she said it to a lot of people, and even more certainly if she said it in a strong way, like 100% committed, I'm leaving this guy, I'm done, he did this and this and this, he said this and this and this, things that she would never say if she intended to stay married with you. Now, once she feels open, hey, I trust this changes, I do want to stay married with you, what do I do with the fact that I said these things? So it's important to walk her through that phase of how to navigate that, how to make that about face gently and intelligently. But those are the 5 phases, and this sequence must be honored. So as we wrap up the video, I'm going to give you another bonus resource, a video where I talk about the dangers of separation. For example, there's one major danger in separation, and that is that very often when a woman says she's doing it as a trial period for the purpose of, I need some time on my own to see where we're going in this relationship, very often it is the first silent stage of divorce, because what is really happening behind the scenes in her heart is she's trying to gauge and see, how do I feel when I'm not around you, right? How do I feel when I'm not around him? Do I feel less stress, less anxiety, more anxiety? Watch that video. Under this video, you'll see a link to the marriage cancer video. You'll also see a link to the separation video, because there are other big mistakes guys make when approaching separation, and it's important to understand them and do your best to avoid them